What's up, everybody? My name is Marybeth Hill. I'm a person of long-term recovery. I am also somebody who has successfully reintegrated society after incarceration, and I am so excited to bring you Breaking Quiet, a podcast created for women, by women, a place for us to lift up our voices and to share our experience in recovery and reentry. And we are so excited for you guys to join us today. I have a friend of mine here named Tiffany. And we won't get too far into it. I'll let her introduce herself and we're going to get right on in it. So, Tiffany, are you excited?
Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yeah.
You are the very first guest ever on Breaking Quiet. So when I decided to do this podcast, I wanted to have a space for women in reentry and recovery to talk about our journey. And so today you're my very first guest, and I'm so excited to have you.
Yay.
Are you excited to be here? Are you nervous?
Yeah.
Don't be nervous,
It's
friend.
okay, though.
No,
Nerves
it's
are
not.
good. Nerves are good. Means you're outside your comfort zone.
Exactly. Everybody needs the opportunity to hear your story, right?
Yeah.
So let's get off into it. Tell me about Tiffany. What did Tiffany's childhood look like?
So when I was a kid, I was like 2 days old and I was adopted by the parents that raised me. And I had a wonderful childhood. I really did. Like we traveled all the time. We went on cruises. We went to Hawaii. We went to Italy when I was like 17. We did all of the things, right? But like at the same time, there was always this thing inside of me that was just kind of like, nah, like something's missing, right? And I never really knew how to express that as a kid. So it always came out as anger, and I treated my parents like crap because of it. I don't know even really how to explain it. It just something felt empty.
We kind of were talking about that even before we came in here to do the show today, right? Like I was asking you, I've always wondered that, people who have been through the foster care system or who were adopted as babies, and if you ever thought that that addiction side, came. Do you actually know your paternal parents?
Mm-mm. No, I never knew them. And I don't know much about them. I've only ever been told that my mom was young, and that um that's about all I know. Like I don't know much. And I really honestly, I don't even know that I want to know. Like I'm kind of curious if I look like one of them, but the whole, did my addiction come from them? Like for me, I'm on the other side of it now. Like all I know now is that it happened, it hurt, we're moving on from it. And I got to see the whole adoption thing from a totally different side about 2 years ago when I gave a child of my own up for adoption. So, I mean,
It's
see that.
crazy. I talk about this all the time in all the places that I travel to. So if you guys don't know me and you're listening today, I work for an organization called the National Peer Recovery Alliance, and I work for the Archway Institute, and we're a nonprofit that works on recovery efforts across the nation. And I love asking that question whenever I go into these different spaces,
Mhm.
like, what do you think the gateway drug is? I love to hear the answers, right? So like if I ever go into the high schools or if I was speaking to like a younger generation and I ask them, what do you think the gateway drug is? And the first thing that they always tell me is like alcohol or weed. But I can tell you as a person who is in long-term recovery, like it's not even a substance, right? Like the gateway drug is trauma.
Mhm.
We've all experienced something in our lives. Like for you, it was adoption, or if like for me, it was an unstable household. Like my parents weren't addicts, but it was the trauma that I experienced as a young kid that inevitably made me use substances, to cope with the way that I feel. So I can only imagine what being adopted, was like.
Mhm.
Was that traumatic for you? Like to know that these people technically, they were your parents, right? But they weren't your blood parents.
I think it didn't really set in at first. Like when I was a kid, like I didn't understand it. Like I knew that I wasn't their blood and I knew that, the rest of my family wasn't blood. I knew that. But I didn't understand how that came to be, until I got a little bit older and I kind of understood exactly what adoption was. And I took that And I feel like I flipped it into something super negative in my mind instead of thinking, okay, well, my mother did exactly what she thought was best for me. I thought this woman didn't want me. I wasn't good enough.
Right.
She wouldn't, how could someone not want their child, and just give them up without even a second thought, right? Um, so when I got to like the teenage years, I got hormones going crazy. I think nobody wants me. So why not just, get all the attention on me by acting like a psycho
Yeah.
is pretty much what I did at that age.
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, when I was a kid, you know, my parents were caught in their own mess, right? Like they were constantly fighting, they were constantly arguing. When I was good, they never paid attention to me, and it literally it made me have to be a bad kid. I started figuring out at a really young age, like when I was bad, and that's when I would get attention, and I think that a lot of us, especially as children, right? Like that's our children crave the attention of their parents, and I craved, and it didn't even matter to me. Like it didn't matter how that attention came. And, and I liked it, and most of the time that attention came from negative things, right? Like me acting out, me being crazy. I love to fight. I love to party. I loved to be that girl. And not only that, and I feel like we're so similar in this area too. Like, whenever I was happy and I was crazy and I got all this attention and I loved that attention and I didn't care how I got it, if it came from boys, if it came from girls, if it came whatever external factors that I needed to validate who I was as a person, I was okay with that. So tell me a little bit about the addiction. When did that start for you?
So I didn't actually start using anything until I was 18, I think, because like I said, I rebelled a lot when I was younger. So, when I was in my teenage years, like the number one thing that was like my parents' shtick, like the thing that they were not letting up on was school. I had to finish high school. They wanted me to graduate. There was no such thing as a GED in my household. Like
Yeah.
we were getting a high school diploma. And so I ended up in this place in Branson. It's no longer there now, but it's called Shelterwood Academy, and it's essentially like a boarding school for kids that just don't wanna listen to their parents, pretty much.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was there, I can't remember how long, but I ended up graduating high school from there. And so when I came home from that, that's when I reconnected with some people that I had gone to the public schools in my town with, and, I started rebelling against my parents there, and that's when I started drinking, that's when I started smoking weed, and I had no idea what hard drugs were at that point. Like, I knew hard drugs existed, but if one was sitting in front of me, I couldn't have told you what it was.
Yeah.
Um, but that's where I kinda found myself, you know, at the house parties, blacking out, doing those things and, just being reckless at that age. About 18, 19, I would say. And then, of course, that ultimately led to me getting kicked out of my parents' house, which just amped it up even more.
If you don't mind me asking, like, what area are you from? Like, where did you grow up?
Northwest Arkansas,
Northwest Arkansas.
Bentonville.
And I'm always curious about that, right? Because Arkansas is such a rural state. So, like, if you're listening anywhere else in the nation at this point, which you might not be, but if you are, Arkansas is very, very rural. And that is one of the biggest things, like in my career now in recovery, that I love to focus on. And that's the preventative aspect of it, right? Like, if we can reach the generation when they are younger, that's where it starts, and it really starts with communities. We look at Arkansas as a whole. There's not resources. We were talking about this before. Like, there's not resources for mental health and substance use in Arkansas for kids. And not only that, though, the community aspect of it, like, I know, we both grew up in these small towns. When there's nothing to do for a kid, right?
Yeah.
What do? And we party. 'Cause
Mhm.
it started like that for me too, on the weekends, just having fun, never in your wildest dreams, I know in mine, did I ever think that me hanging out and kicking it on the weekends was inevitably gonna lead us down the path that we went down.
Right.
So tell me more about that.
Right. So, like, I can remember when, around that time, I was, like, hanging out with this big group of people, and it's crazy to think that a lot of those people, they never went down the path that I did. They were able to drink and do the things and, keep a job and be responsible adults during the day, and then at nighttime get blackout drunk and turn around and do it the next day. Whereas me, I'm like, "Okay, alcohol's not doing it for me anymore. I need something different." And, at that point, I had met my oldest children's father. And he was very much into other things and introduced me into methamphetamine. And marijuana, alcohol, never, they just masked, at the beginning for me. When I had my first hit of methamphetamine, I felt like I had made it. Like, this is the thing that is going to take me through the rest of my life, and I'm going to be perfect. Everything's going to be great. I'm going to be able to do all the things. Wonderful. I've made it.
Yeah.
Wrong. So, so wrong. But that time in my life, like, I was very disconnected from my parents. I was very disconnected from my family. I started having children back to back to back to back and just throwing drugs all into the mix. And it was just so chaotic. And like, the saddest part about all of it is I have so very little memory of that time. Like, I have recently learned that, and I don't know if this is 100% scientific, but I read it and it's real in my brain. Um, that I think I disassociated so much during that time that, like, I barely have memories of my children being born, and I barely have memories of anything good. It's all bad memories. But I don't know, like, a lot of that time in my life was so surrounded by the chaos. Like, it wasn't so much I needed to get my next high, it was more so, what are we gonna do in between? Because there was no stopping, like, the drugs never stopped, the alcohol's never stopped. And during that time, like I said, I have amazing parents, okay? Amazing parents, and I did not appreciate them during that time.
Yeah.
They bought me car after car after car after car, house after house. You have no idea. My dad literally rescued me that whole time for almost a whole decade. Every time I fell, he picked me back up. My car got impounded, he got it out. Literally rescued me and saved me from so much of my bottom. Um, and I think that is what kept it going for so long.
Hey, listen, I identify with you in that aspect for so long, right? Like our parents, they come from a generation where substance use isn't talked about, mental health is not talked about, the resources are not available. Um, they don't know what to do. Like my parents were so similar in that fact. Like every time I would wreck a car, they would get me another one. I would hear about it, right? Like I would hear all about myself. But every time I would fall, they would pick me back up. Every time I would get arrested or something would happen, they eventually would step in and take my kids. And so all of those things, and anybody who's listening who might be a caregiver, bad mistake,
Yeah.
and they thought they were helping and they were, there was this quote that I saw not too long ago that said like, forgive yourself because you were just doing the best with what you had. And I have to look at it like that. Like I was so angry with them for so long for always saving me. Cause I'm like, damn, maybe I could have fixed myself way before, but they just were doing what they thought was best, and they were constantly saving me. And I never ever hit that bottom either.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about that. You were pregnant and using.
Mhm. So, through my first 3 pregnancies, all I did was smoke marijuana. This is back before Garrett's Law.
Yeah.
So, like, you could literally smoke your whole pregnancy, excuse me, and they wouldn't do anything about it. The hospitals wouldn't take your kid away, like, as long as it was just marijuana, they would leave you alone. Um, and so I did that with my first 3 kids. I had them in 2012, 2013, and 2015. And then I really started picking up the heavy drugs after that. And my mom and dad stepped in and ended up taking guardianship of my oldest 3 children. And, around that time, I met my second baby daddy, as we'll call him.
Yeah.
And, that's kinda when my life really kinda went, like, and it wasn't his fault at all. For a long time, I blamed him, but it wasn't his fault, it was mine.
I'm sorry.
I made a lot of those choices, and about 4 months after meeting him, I found out I was pregnant. I actually found out I was pregnant in Las Vegas. Um, Crazy.
Dang.
Yeah, I got stuck in Vegas. So, it's kinda crazy. I took a guy home. He said he wanted to go home for the holidays, and so I drove him out there, and he was supposed to pay for our gas back, and he didn't. He didn't have any money when we got there. He disappeared in a parking garage. And I found out I was pregnant shortly around that somewhere on that trip, I remember, and I ended up having to call my dad, and my phone was about to die. My charger was broken. My car was like on the gas, like the gas light was on, like
Yeah.
you were screwed. And my dad sent me the money to get home, like it was stuff like that where he just kept rescuing me, he just kept saving me.
Don't you I look back a lot of times in active addiction and, like, the pure insanity,
Girl.
like, the pure insanity,
Yes.
and now that I've had a little bit of clean time and a little bit of recovery under my belt, I'm like, "How did I live like that for so long?"
Dude,
You know what I mean? Like, so many times of, like,
it was normal.
yeah, like, the
It
chaos was
Yeah.
normal,
Yeah.
and I was okay with it, and I think about that, and I try to put myself in, like, the perspective of, like, my family members or, like, my parents, and I'm like, I don't I could never imagine, like, having to watch one of my children, right, like, live like that, like, just the insanity of, like, watching me destroy my life, you
Right.
know, but always being there to pick you up whenever you fall,
Right.
I guess, that's what we're supposed to do as parents, right, like, we're supposed to nurture, and we're supposed to love, and we're supposed to take care of our children, but where does that line get drawn, Like, where is the line draw to where now we are no longer helping them, but now we're just completely enabling,
Yeah.
you know?
I think, uh, I think the time when the line was, drawn with my parents. So I had another baby in 2016. Um, and during that time we were homeless. We were, running the streets with this little baby. I was in the world of prostitution. There's not really a soft way to say that, so we'll just say it, I was in that world around that time. Um, and the relationship with that child's father was extremely abusive. Like, he was the type that got off on the humiliation side of things. Like, the more people that were around, the more he did, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, and it, kind of all came to a head when, we were staying in an abandoned gas station out in the middle of nowhere. And, I called my parents and I was like, "Look, I need to come home." And they wouldn't let me come home, but they would let my son. So they ended up taking my son, and then what I remember of it was about I think it was Friday when I dropped him off, and then that following Monday, my dad was supposed to help me with a hotel room and all these other things he had told me he was gonna do, and then somewhere in that midst, he changed his mind, and that's fine. That's 100% fine. But my doped up sick brain said, "Mm-mm, you said you're gonna do this, you're gonna do it." So I spazzed out and I went to his house and I busted in his house and I, acted a fool in front of all my children, in front of my mom. And I took my son and I ran. Mind you, I had custody, but I also went in there and did this the whole wrong way.
Right.
So I caught a bunch of felonies, ran from the cops, ended up, having to deal with all this legal stuff when I could have just let it go.
Was it the
But
first time that you actually, like, experienced legal problems during your addiction?
big legal problems, yeah. I mean, I had been caught with marijuana. I had been, got some speeding tickets. I had a small misdemeanor assault charge, but like nothing felony. This is my first like felonies. And I was like, holy shit, like what am I gonna do? But of course, after all of that, the craziness went down. Of course, the first thing I do is get high. Of course. How am I gonna deal with all of these legal problems if I'm sober? I can't do that
Isn't
sober.
that wild that that's our
Like,
go-to, right?
I
Like,
didn't even tell my son's father that he was in DHS custody until after we got done snorting the Roxys. Like, I was already fucked up on the Roxys, and I looked at him and said, "Your son's in DHS custody. What are we gonna do?" Like, it didn't even click in my brain to even tell him. Like, it didn't matter because I just needed to get high before I could focus on anything. Um, and, so that's kind of like when my parents and my relationship really separated,
yeah.
because I said some really fucked up shit to them, like, and I treated them like dirt. And now I can see it. Back then, it was their fault.
Yeah, we're stuck in this illusion that, we're the victim and how dare you? And, we've created this culture in our life now, like they're doing all these things out of the kindness of their heart, but then we become so engrossed in our own mess that we can't even see that, that how we're treating them. So
Right.
you're fighting this case. And this is the first time that you go to prison?
No, I ended up getting sober for part of that time while I was fighting that case, and I ended up getting a job, and I was doing well there towards the end, and, my dad actually testified at my court case, like, at my trial, I guess you would call it. I don't remember
Your
exactly what it
sentencing?
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
He testified and he told the judge that he didn't wanna see me go to prison. He wanted to see if I could, straighten up. And so the judge took his recommendation and gave me, I think, 8 years of probation or something like that, which at the time I was like, "Oh, cool, whatever. I'll be good. I can go back to doing what I'm doing." And
That's what I was gonna ask you. So in that little time that you had of, being abstinent, we'll call it abstinence, right?
yeah.
Were you in recovery? Because that's the one thing, so that's I love talking about, like, what this looks like and what this space looks like. Like, there was a time in my life too where I found a little bit of abstinence, when I first got pregnant with my oldest son, and I just quit doing all the things, and I was working, going to school. I was substituting, my drug addiction with other things, but I wasn't in a life of recovery. So you weren't in recovery at that time?
No, I had no idea that that even existed.
Yeah.
Like, now looking back, I can see where it just progressed and progressed and progressed. So with my first 3 children, like, it was easy to just not do anything other than smoke marijuana, and then, it got to where I couldn't do that, and then, now I've got 4 children, I'm fighting a case to get my son back, I can't stay sober, I'm fighting with his dad all the time, I'm not getting any help from my parents anymore, and, I finally kind of hit one of my bottoms, I guess you would call it, and the time that I did have sober during fighting that case was forced. I didn't have a choice in
Yeah.
that matter.
Right.
Like, it was my friends around me that were also sober that forced me to do right for a few months. I got a job because of a very close friend of mine that actually just I was just talking to her the other day. She found me outside of a Krispy Kreme standing on the side of the road with no plan what to do, and she picked me up and she took me home. She gave me a change of clothes and a shower and got me a job where she worked, let me drive her extra vehicle. Like, literally, the only thing I had to do was just not get high in her house.
Yeah.
So I had no choice. And then it just kind of, you know, I don't really even know how I ended up back
Let me ask you
using.
this. And so I love, so not only do I work like in the prevention space, the recovery space, but I do have a passion for reentry. And one of the biggest things in Arkansas that I see daily is that there are not a lot of services that are provided to people who are on probation, right?
Right.
Like that is something that I will always fight for. Like we always wait until a person has gone to prison and then we want to work on what reentry looks like. But there are so many times prior to a person going to prison, like in your case, you had probation where you obviously had a drug problem, you obviously were struggling in life. Were there any kind of services that were provided to you while on probation that could have helped you possibly to further your recovery at that time?
If there were, I had no idea about it because a lot of my issue during that time was I didn't even want to go into the probation office. I was a very catch me if you can type
Yeah.
of person at that time. Like, once I had decided that I was going to start using again and I wasn't going to go to my PO, I wasn't going to do any of the things, I just stopped going and I just left Benton County in general and went to Washington County and just would not, like, I was very careful where I would go, what I would do, like I had no idea that there was even another way.
It's crazy. So I just recently presented at this conference called Incarcerate, and I know the incarceration rates in Arkansas are high, but do you know that Arkansas is number one in the nation, not in the nation, excuse me, number one in the world per capita for incarceration. So 912 people per 100,000 residents in the state of Arkansas are incarcerated. And if you look at those numbers, the majority of those numbers come from people who have offenses on probation or parole, right? So, like, that means that either drug tested dirty, they didn't go to their probation fee or their probation appointments, and so they're absconded, or, they've had some kind of technical violation that's put them back incarcerated. And so that's why I'm always so interested to like really hear about people's experiences whenever they're in those spaces,
Right.
right? Because we don't offer them the help. Like that's something that is so huge, like we don't ever take the time to stop and ask and be like, hey, what is going on with you that you're not reporting? Why, why are you not showing up?
Mm.
Why are your fees not paid? I often wonder if maybe we just stop to ask those questions,
Right.
we would discover that the majority of these people have substance abuse problems. They're unsheltered. They don't have the basic necessities in life to be this productive member of society that we want them to be.
Right.
And so instead of helping them, what do? We just incarcerate them because it's easier. It's
Right.
easier just to push them to the wayside and say, okay, well, you made a mistake. Go do your time in the county. And then guess what? It's a never ending cycle because they get out, they don't have treatment, they're still unhoused. And then we still expect them to do all the things that a productive member of society is supposed to do.
Right.
And they've never been taught these things.
Right. And I mean, so at the same time of being on probation for these felonies, I'm also fighting a DHS case to try and get my son back. And because of the nature of my crimes, I had a no contact order with my son. So I'm trying to fight to get my son back and I can't even see him.
Yeah.
And the foster family that had him at the time, they're amazing, amazing people. And I treated them like dirt. I treated my caseworker like dirt. I treated everyone like dirt. And instead of, trying to do what was right and, try and get my son back and try to do probation correctly and all these other things, like if there were resources to make that happen, I had no idea because I didn't care.
Yeah.
I had given up on myself, on my son, on my family, on everyone. I gave up. I let go. I quit. I had a court date for I forget what they called it, but basically they were deciding whether they were going to terminate my rights.
Right.
And I didn't show up because I had felony warrants. And they kept telling me, "Oh, well, we're not going to arrest you from family court. Da, 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 da. It's different." I'm like, "I don't trust you. F you, basically. Do whatever you want. I'm done."
Yeah.
And so my son ended up getting adopted by the foster family, whom I love. I'm still in contact with them now. So I have a relationship with that son of mine now, but at the time, that was not in my mind. My mind was keep running, stay out of prison, get high. That was the only things that I could focus on. And I kept running and I kept running and I kept running until I couldn't run anymore,
Yeah.
and it just honestly, like, it all kind of it was like an accident. Like, I don't even really, like, I never left the house at certain times of day. Like, I would always be inside after dark. If I couldn't see outside around me, I wasn't going anywhere. You know what I
Right.
mean? That I was very careful. And I remember it was Thanksgiving of 2020. And uh I decided that I was gonna leave at 4 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving. Why?
4 o'clock. That's a great time to
Why?
travel.
Why? Right? And so I remember I hopped in this pickup truck with, one of my friend's sons who drove all the way from Rogers to come pick me up in Springdale. And this was an old pickup truck, and the latch on the driver's door broke. So I took the shoelaces out of my shoes and I tied them together, and I tied one to the outside of the door, and I was holding the other end to keep the door closed because it was a 5-speed truck and he couldn't drive and shift and hold the door at the same time. So
Yeah.
we're doing this, we're going down the interstate, and we end up getting pulled over because the door's flying open down the interstate. And instead of like trying to run or act stupid or do anything, I looked at the officer and I said, "Before I tell you anything else, can I smoke a cigarette?" And he was like, "Sure. What are you about to tell me?" And I said, "Well, I have felony warrants and I'm more than likely going to go to jail. So I just like to smoke a cigarette before that happens." And
Yeah.
he was like, "Okay." So I went to jail and I decided, I woke up in county jail, and so many people in recovery have heard me say this. I woke up in jail with no eyebrows. Literally looked like a naked mole rat, dude. Like, I had gotten so high that I shaved them all off, which was kind of fun when you were, during the time of
I
using. It was fun because I could change my facial expressions every day.
I can't.
But obviously waking up, sobering up in jail on Thanksgiving of all days. And you know what the first thing I saw that morning when I got on the kiosk?
Yeah.
A message from my dad.
Isn't that crazy?
Still there
Still
after
there.
all that time.
Yeah.
Still there.
So is this whenever you found recovery?
No, so that's when I was in county jail. And in Benton County, they don't have, or well, at that time, I don't think they do now, but at that time, they didn't have any of that. They didn't have anybody coming in and talking about think they had church
Yeah.
once in a while, but it was never like Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous. There was no like treatment, it was just sit down, shut up, you know, do your time pretty
Yeah.
much. And at that point, I was in jail and I was like, you know what? I'm sick. I'm sick and tired of being sick and freaking tired, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And so I remember I sat there until February. So this was in November, February. I had my court date. And I remember telling my public defender, I was like, look, I don't even really want to go back and forth with all this nonsense and offers and this and that, whatever. I was like, what's my first offer? He said, well, ADC. And then he was about to go into all the details. And I said, I don't care. Let's just sign it. Let's just get this over with so I can, get my ADC number, move on with my life and go from there. And he was like, okay. So we signed it right then. It was the beginning of February, I think, or it was like February 12th or something like that. I don't remember. And I got transferred in April. I went to McPherson. And that was the first time that I had actually seen anything recovery change your life, anything like that. I had an older Hispanic lady sleeping underneath me, and I'll never forget this. And she told me, she said, you're going to get a year denial. And I said, no, I'm not. She said, yes, you will. She said, you need to apply for all the programs. And she told me all about them. And I was like, okay, so I did that. I applied and I got moved into one of the program barracks, and I was in TC for a little while,
So
and
for
then
people who are listening who've never heard like what TC is, kind of describe that. Like what does that look like in the prison setting?
so in the prison setting, that's, the difference between a program barracks and a regular barracks, in my experience. Everybody's experience is different.
Right.
But in my experience, it was a lot more structured. It was get up, we have these classes, you're gonna do these things and you're gonna learn during the day. Whereas in a regular barracks, you're just kind of roaming around doing whatever it is that you do. Mind you, thank goodness, I had a very, very close friend of mine from my childhood. And I'm not saying that her trips to prison were a good thing, but her experience
Yeah.
helped me a lot because she gave me guidance and she told me two very important things that I'll never forget. Her name is Sydney, and I love her very much. She told me, ride your rack, read books, and don't get a girlfriend. I said, okay. And that's what I did. You know, I can't tell you how grateful I am that it came to me going to the Department of Corrections.
How long was your sentence?
I had a 6-year sentence with 6 suspended. Um, and I applied for 309, I don't know how to describe that.
So if you're listening and you don't know what 309 is, it's kind of like a work release program that they offer.
The county jail.
Right. And they let you go to county jails and then you will inevitably do your time, your prison sentence in a county jail on like a work detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I applied for like work release where they like take you out and you go work
Right.
somewhere. And then I applied for reentry. My fleeing charges, you know, made me not eligible to go to the other two. So I got accepted into reentry. And I don't know why, but little side note, for a long time during my addiction, my gut kept telling me, let's move to Little Rock. Let's move to Little Rock. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was God. I don't know. But something kept telling me I need to go to Little Rock. I need to get out of Northwest Arkansas and I need to go to Little Rock. And I never did until I went to prison and I got accepted into reentry and I came to Little Rock. And I did the program of Hope Rises.
Yeah. That
And
program's not
it's
operating
not there
anymore.
anymore
Yeah.
now. They have a place, but I don't remember what it's called. It's in Clarksville now.
Yeah. So they have Safe Haven in Clarksville. That's what took the place of Hope Rises.
Mhm.
But I remember whenever Hope Rises was in Little Rock.
That saved my life, dude. It really did because that's when I was introduced to Narcotics Anonymous
Yeah.
was through Hope Rises because Hope Rises was in a building with one little tiny baby window right by the door. And that was it. There was no windows. There was no getting out. There was no boys,
Yeah.
you know,
Distractions.
no distractions, but they did take us out to meetings once in a while. And so I would get on the little bus and go to the meetings and listen and obviously stare at the boys that were at the meeting or, whatever, just sitting around and do the things. And it was great. But I think the biggest influence that actually told me I could do it, it's so crazy, was my PO after I got out of the facility. Her name's Heather Wells. That woman, dude, she saved my life, seriously.
You know what? And I love that for you because I have a very similar experience with that, right? But like my PO, well, she was actually my pretrial officer, the one who was in charge of me before I went to prison. Her name is Allison Schiffer. So if you guys are listening, shout out to the POs who literally are life changers because let's be realistic. If you look at the grand scheme of things and you look at the way that our system is set up, probation officers and parole officers are handed this caseload that is crazy big, right? And so the compassion that you feel 9 times out of 10 is very minimal, because it's just like in any kind of field, right? Like if you look in the behavioral health field, in the substance use field, in prison reentry, whatever those spaces look like, whenever you are bogged down with these caseloads that are so massive, it's hard to add that human element into it.
Right.
So whenever you can find the ones who genuinely are there, not just for the paycheck, right? Who are there with compassion and love in their heart,
Yeah.
like you're lucky. And so I'm so glad that you had her. So she was a game changer for you.
Yes, dude. Her and Amber Corliss too. Both of them, they came in clutch
Yeah.
in the end of it because, when you get out of reentry, at least how my experience went, I don't know how the women's facility does things now, but you're on an ankle monitor for a total of like 6 months.
I remember when I first met you, you had the ankle monitor on.
Yeah, and so when I got that ankle monitor cut off in March of 2022, I felt that sense of freedom again, and I was like, "Ooh, let me go do whatever I wanna do," right? And for a long time that worked until I was doing my step work with my sponsor or whatever, but I was doing it very surface level, and I wasn't really digging into the part of me that caused me to get high.
Right.
I was just still kind of like after the superficial things. I wanted the boys to look at me. I wanted the attention. I wanted this. I wanted that. I wanted the girls to look at me,
Yeah.
whatever it was. And then I found myself in a relapse, and because of the open door, open ears policy that, Amber Corliss and Heather Wells had with me during that time, I found myself in a very, very not smart decision, and I had ended up using my DOC again. I got high on meth. And you know what I did? I called them. I called Amber Corliss first, actually. Heather Wells was my officer at the time. But I called Corliss and I was like, "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I'm high." And she was like, "High on what?" And I said, "Methamphetamine." And she said, "Okay." And then we three-way called Officer Wells. All of us together got on the phone. And I'm still actively high talking to my PO. And I'm like, "I don't know what to do." And she said, "Go to rehab. It's going to be okay. We're going to work through this." She didn't get mad at me. She didn't yell at me. She was disappointed,
Yeah.
but she didn't treat me like I had ruined every single thing ever.
Absolutely.
She treated this as an opportunity to learn from. Um, so I did that. I decided I was gonna get clean. Um, During that time, I wasn't speaking to my sponsor. Um, and, her and I had a, confrontation, you'll call it, I guess. We almost fought outside of a meeting. So we broke up for a little while there.
Okay.
She's amazing. Her name's Shannon. Love her. And I called her. I remember I called her, I was crying, and I was like, "I don't know what to do, but I need to go to rehab." And she was like, "Okay, let's figure this out." So I filled out the application for natural stay. I went there, and mind you, had all of this happened in Northwest Arkansas, I would have had to travel over 3 hours just to get to a rehab center
Yeah.
to do 21 days.
Right.
And that's not doable when you're homeless and have no
Absolutely.
car and have no money and have no job. That's not an option for a lot of people up there,
Yeah.
And so I ended up going to treatment. And when I got there, I'll never forget it. My sponsor said to me, she said, "You have two options at this point." I said, "Okay." She said, "You can get clean or this disease is going to kill you."
Absolutely. That's the one thing I swear, like, we talk about in recovery a lot. You hear the saying, jails, institutions, and death. And I got chills. Like I literally, like I've preached to the choir and people probably get so tired of hearing me say this. I'm like, drugs are not what drugs used to be. And you either have to want to live or you're going to die.
Yeah.
Like, because we're in the recovery community, how many people we lose every week, to the disease of addiction. And it's not always just a fentanyl crisis, right? Because let's be realistic, like drugs are not what they're supposed to be or what they used to be anymore. I'm not going to say what they're supposed to be because you shouldn't be doing them
They're not what
regardless.
people tell you that they are.
Exactly.
Because the people that are giving them to you don't know what they are either.
Right. Yeah. They're coming from all over, not from the United States. They're coming across the border and they're coming prepackaged next to things that were ready to kill you.
Yeah.
And so we always get this like, how many times in your life have you ever thought about like, oh, I'm just going to get high this one more time or I'm going to get my life together? And people are not getting that opportunity to do that.
Because that one last time,
You're done.
that time that takes them out.
Exactly. So you went to Natural State.
Yeah.
And that place holds a very special place in my heart. I think that was probably where I saw you again, because Natural State, shameless plug for Natural State. I will always, talk about the wonderful things and the wonderful people that are there who genuinely care, who are ready to help people
Yeah.
get clean. So if you're listening, yeah.
From the moment you hit the front door, it's nothing but love. Nothing but love. No matter how much you push them away, they're going to keep loving you. Trust me. I was so aggravated by it at first. I was like, just leave me alone. Like,
Yeah.
let me be. I just want to sleep. I just can't tell you how grateful I am for having that as an option, because um it's not just a treatment facility. The cool thing about Natural State for me was that I had been in Little Rock for so long that I not only knew almost everybody that worked there,
Yeah.
they knew me. Like they knew my story. Because I'm not a quiet person, I
Yeah.
love to tell people where I've been, what I've done, where I come from, because you cannot understand who I am today if you don't understand what I've been through. You
Absolutely.
can't see the change unless you see where it started.
I remember when you first came around and you were just a hot mess. And
Yeah.
so to know you right in the beginning and to see who you are today is like leaps and bounds. And I hope you know that like I'm incredibly super, super proud of you, dude.
Yeah.
Like you're out here killing it in life. So this time after you go to Natural State, you stay in recovery.
Yeah, this is it.
So
Like
tell me, what does your life look like today?
today, I work in long-term care for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's it's humbling. It's very humbling. Um, I feel as though like I needed something in my life that was not about me, and that's
Absolutely.
exactly what that job is. It's not about me. I have a wonderful, wonderful relationship with an amazing man. I have a good job I've been at for almost 2 years. I've never had PTO ever in my entire life, and I have it now.
Yes, girl.
You know what I mean? I have hours that I can use to take holidays off. That was never a thing before. I never even understood what that was. The first time I used my PTO, I had to ask them how it worked because I'd never done it before. I have a driver's license now. I have my own vehicle with it registered. I'm actually going to the DMV today to renew my tags a month early. Like, I'm doing things today that I never thought possible. I'm actually on unsupervised parole now.
What?
Like, I don't even have to go back into the office. And what's crazy? I still keep in contact with Officer Wells. I haven't heard from Corliss in a long time. I think she's still doing whatever she was doing then. But I do. I give Officer Wells updates on my life. Like, this is what I always wanted. I wanted the calm. I wanted the peace. I wanted you know, the ability to be a part of my kids' lives.
Yeah. So what does that look like today?
So, they still I have 6 children total. 4 of them live with, my parents, and the other 2 were adopted by the same family. So I actually got pregnant in recovery.
It happens.
Oopsie.
Yeah, it
Little
happens.
little whoopsie there, but, it just so happened that I feel like it was meant to happen that way, because like I said, I was adopted, and I didn't understand it until I saw it through my mother's eyes.
Yeah.
I had a child in recovery in November of 2023, and, I told myself in the beginning when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna keep this baby. I'm gonna raise this baby." I was living in a sober living house Okay. I had a job. I worked minimum wage. I had no car, no driver's license. I barely had medical insurance. It actually got canceled halfway through my pregnancy. Like I really didn't have any foundation to start with. And so my heart just led me to, place that child for adoption and actually put her in the hands of the foster family that was dealing with me back when I was in my active addiction. Um and so I have a relationship with them. I actually just in the beginning of August, we had a big joint birthday party for all 6 of my children, plus the little boy that same family adopted that's not mine. That whole family, my parents, my man, like, we all were up there at my dad's house having a pool party August 9th of this year. We were all together. Like, they came down for my 2-year coining. Like, it's amazing how my dad's help now is it's just letting me see my kids, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense, like, um, and I'm so grateful for the day that he cut me off
Yeah.
because it finally taught me how to be an adult on my own.
Absolutely. Those are the gifts of recovery, right? Like,
Mhm.
remember I told you this, like our stories are so similar, and I actually signed over rights to my daughter in recovery too. I was actually in prison when I did it, but I knew once again we go back to that saying, like, you got to forgive yourself because you are only doing the best with what you have at the time.
Right.
But those are the gifts of recovery, right? Family reunification, being accountable today, being able to have PTO and health insurance, and like all these things that we consider like luxuries in life because we never had those things. But
They're normal to everyone
yeah,
else.
but to us,
Crazy.
they're everything,
Mhm.
you know?
Just being
Tiffany,
able to drive that vehicle out,
right.
like,
Yeah.
what?
And to even be able to say, like, I know when I need to get my oil changed. And we were talking about that too. Like, it's time for me to get my oil changed. Like, who would have ever thought that? Like,
Rotate my tires.
right, rotate my tires. Like, who would have think that these little things, would mean so much to us? But that means that we are being accountable today. We are being responsible with our lives today.
Right.
You know, um, if you're listening, and I hope this is my one hope for this podcast, right? Is not to just reach people who are in recovery. I want that too, because I want to give that hope shot. Maybe there's somebody that's listening and they're struggling with addiction. I want to give that hope shot, but I hope one day that this podcast reaches everybody. Like it reaches the family members of people who are, lost in addiction, that they can understand, a little bit from our perspective as well. Maybe learn some do's and some don'ts.
Crazy thing, I was just thinking as you were saying that, the craziest part about, living in recovery and long-term recovery is, the things that we learn in recovery, the tools,
Yeah,
I guess you would call them, they're not just for not getting high. They teach
exactly.
us how to do other things too, like when my mother got diagnosed with this, cancer, her third bout with cancer, you know, um, it scared me at first, but then that little part of my brain that helps me stay clean also said, "Okay, well, you don't have to worry about that whole thing right now.
Right.
Just worry about it at one day at a time." You don't have to think about the entire scope of all of that. Just like I don't have to sit here and think about not using drugs for the rest of my life.
Right.
I only have to think about today. Today,
Absolutely.
I see no reason to get high. I see no reason that I need to go back out today.
That's right.
Tomorrow, I will make the same decision and so on. But I don't have to think about tomorrow until tomorrow gets here with anything in my life, not just using drugs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just like with the whole motherhood thing, my entire life, I wanted to be a mom. That's all I wanted. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to do all of the things, because I felt like it wasn't done for me.
Yeah.
I wanted to do that. And I just kept messing it up, kept messing it up, kept messing it up in my brain. Right. When in reality, I mean, I wasn't messing it up. I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to stop using. And now I believe that, and I really hope that this message gets to people that need to hear it because, you know, there's a lot of times in recovery that, you know, I felt, okay, I'm not doing this right. I feel now after walking through giving a child up for adoption sober, motherhood or fatherhood,
Right.
either way, is doing what's best for your children even when it's not what you want.
Absolutely.
because what's best for my children is not what I want right now. If I could snap my fingers and have them back with me and be able to afford to take care of them 24/7, I would. But that's just not what's best for them right now. Right now, they've been where they are for over 10 years. Uprooting them would do more damage than good. But that's hard to admit for someone in early recovery because they're like, I have to get my children back. I have to do A, B, and C because that's what I see
Do
other
that.
people do.
Yeah, I remember early recovery for me too. It was like that too. Like I was like, I got it. We are people of instant gratification. You know what I mean? And so that and did not change once I got clean. So I remember when I got clean, I was like, this has to happen right now. I need to have the car. I need to have the job. I need to have the house. I need to have the thing. And then I'm like, whoa, right? You said it perfectly, right? It's one day at a time. And then before you know it, you have multiple years of 1 days at a time.
Right.
And then our life looks completely different. So I want to ask you, and I'm going to be asking everybody that comes on the show, if there is one thing that you want to leave the listeners with, like a motto, a phrase, how you live your life, whatever that might be, what would that one thing be, Tiffany?
For me, it's probably try not to compare your life to others. Try to learn from other people's mistakes, lessons, things like that, but there's no timeline to getting clean and staying clean and living this life of recovery. And, you know, there's no right or wrong way to do it either. I think people think that there's this, cookie cutter response to every single person's addiction or disease, and there's not. I think it's just about reaching the right place at the right time and the right people, and just don't stop. Just do it. Like my sponsor always tells me with my step work, just fucking do it.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and being on the first episode of Breaking Quiet. I am super ecstatic. I'm so glad you're here. I can't wait in like a couple years. We're going to have to do a follow-up, right?
Yeah.
That's the blessings of recovery, man. We get to look at where life takes us from this day. If you are listening, Breaking Quiet is on all major platforms. So however you listen to your podcast, we are streaming there. Subscribe to Long Term with Ty King. That is my friend. He has his own podcast, but we do this together. Also, if you are in Arkansas and you're listening and you're a family member looking for resources, you are a person in recovery looking for resources, you're looking for resources for your community, whatever the case may be, download the app Revive AR. It is a game-changing, life-saving app. Anything that from Narcan to treatment resources to behavioral health resources. Arkansas Drug Take Back is coming up soon. It has all the things necessary for you to figure out for recovery resources here in Arkansas. Thank you guys for listening.